today we're talking all about doing virtual probates. That's right. We're talking about probate. So the first thing you got to understand, probates, real simply, I know this is like really basic, but I have to break it down for you. Probates is basically the process when a person passes away. It is a court process to wind up their financial affairs. Now, specifically what probate actually does, the challenge when somebody passes away, they don't have the legal authority to sign a legal document. That would be a deed, a title to a car, a title to a boat, a title to an RV, and bank accounts, stocks, bonds, you name it, option agreements, anything that's legally in writing, because if someone's passed away, obviously they can't sign it. So probate allows the process for the deceased person to wrap up their financial affairs. So you have to understand how this simply works. When somebody passes away, someone is appointed the PR, the personal rep. And 9 times out of 10, this is spelled out very clearly in the will. And you've got to understand this process, because if you don't, the rest of this will make no sense. I know I'm talking at a very basic level, but you have to understand it. The PR, the personal representative, or the executor, depending what state you're in, is the person that is granted that legal authority to wrap up the deceased person's financial affairs, most importantly on how to transfer deeds and titles. Why that's important is because most of these people are spelled out in the will, and then once they're designated and appointed by the court, once they pay their court fees, most people hire an attorney to do a probate. I would never do a probate on what we call a per se, pro se, whatever you call it, because judges usually frown heavily upon people not using lawyers to navigate through the probate process. Now, knowing that and understanding it is you have to just find a way to get in contact with the PR. And basically, once that person is appointed the PR, the personal representative or the executor, they have the same legal power as the deceased person on that deed, on that title, or anything else. And so many people give out bad information on the internet saying you can't touch a probate until it's completed. That is an absolute lie. It doesn't work that way. And I've been doing this for a long enough time to tell you I have hundreds and hundreds of cases to prove it otherwise to you. So the power is in locating the PR and working with the PR, skip tracing the PR and developing a relationship with the PR and entering into a legal agreement with the PR. Because in essence, you're basically entering the same agreement as the deceased person, and this is the person who's going to be in charge. So once you know who you're looking for in a probate, this is all you kind of have to worry about in the probate process. So if you do this locally or virtually, as long as you can track down the PR and find a creative way to market and engage them, you can do probates anywhere you want in the entire country. And this is what we're here talking about today. And that's what I want you to understand. If you do it this way, guys, it works. Your main focus is that the deceased owned real estate in the county you're looking in, and that you can find out who the PR is so you can skip trace them and reach out to that person to enter into a legal agreement. That's it. If you understand that about probates, you can do them anywhere you want. So we specifically talked about the United States because laws are very different outside the United States. And that's why I only want to focus on the laws that are in front of us. So knowing that, if you understand that your sole focus on the probates is number 1, locate them. And number 2, find the PR and make sure they own real estate in the areas that you market for wholesaling. Once you do that, you can do a probate anywhere. So we're going to get more into details on like how to dig in and do these things virtually. But once you understand that, it's really not that overwhelming. All I need to understand is the PR. Once I know who the PR is, I can get anything I want from a probate. So a lot of people go and chase the heirs, or they actually look for the deceased person, which is the last thing you want to do. The PR, the executor, is the key to all great probate deals. Once you understand that, then you know you can absolutely do this anywhere. So let's move on. So now we're talking about doing virtual probates. This is very simple. It just means you're doing it anywhere other than the area where you actually do probates in your backyard. So a local probate to me is anything within a 75 to maybe 100 mile radius. I know that's a little bit far for some of you guys, but like to me, that would be considered local. And then really anything after that would be we consider virtual. So if I'm in Florida, I go to Alabama, I go to Texas, I go to West Virginia, that is virtual wholesaling. And virtual probates is just a subset of virtual wholesaling. That's it. And I would love to have everybody do probates. The other thing I want you to understand about probates is why are they so advantageous and why are they so great? Well, I'm telling you why they work. Number one, their profit potential is 3 times what you're going to get in your average assignment. Let's talk about why. It's real simple. Most of these houses are vacant. Most of them need plenty of work, definitely updating, deferred maintenance. So they're vacant, they did deferred maintenance, and very few people understand probates and they're scared to death. And here's what most investors, most realtors, actually most cash buyers think. They believe that a probate, you cannot buy a probate until the entire process is complete. And this is your window of opportunity as a wholesaler. You see, if you understand that you don't have to wait till the probate's complete, then you can do some real damage in probates. Because guess what? Everybody else is waiting till the probates are complete. You don't care. The minute the PR is appointed, that is your best opportunity to get a probate deal. It doesn't matter if it's virtually or locally. Once you connect with the PR, because once they're appointed, it will become public record and they will be sought out. But the reality is most realtors and other investors, they're going to wait for third-party publications to come out to get that information. They're going to be weeks behind you. So if you can pull this data straight from the courthouse, and I can't stress this enough, you should be able to beat everybody else to the punch. Remember, speed kills in wholesaling. And that's what we need to work with. So we have to just think about, okay, Rick, how do I do probates virtually? And honestly, it's actually the only difference is you're not physically there. So obviously you're going to have to use the internet and you're going to have to use your phone. That is really the only difference. In the perfect world, I would have you go down to the probate courts, pull the first set of dockets for all the most recent probates opened in that county in the last 30 days. And then I'd get that information. And then all I do is find out if the deceased owned property in that particular county. How do I do that? You simply search the property appraiser site and see if John Doe or Jane Smith owned property in there. And then from there, once I verified it, I'm going to go back to the court docket and I'm going to see who was appointed the PR or the executor or personal representative, which is what PR is. And then once I have that information, I'm just going to skip trace this person's information, most likely their phone number, and I'm going to get a mailing address and I'm going to mail them a simple letter, not a postcard, a letter. If you want to learn more on how to get that letter, go to freewholesaling.com. I share it with you there. And a phone call is pretty straightforward. You're basically just seeing if they have interest in selling the property. I'm going to give you some more tips and tricks on this live. Don't worry about it. I'll show you how to do it. But guys, it's just virtual. That's the only difference. So here's the main thing is instead of you being able to pull the list, you're going to have to get them electronically. And yes, it's the good old via internet. And what you'll have to do is find out your county and then find their probate court. And from there, hopefully, God willing, hopefully, not every county is the same. There's over 3,200 counties out there. The reality is hopefully you can get this data online. Some counties are easier than others. Some counties, to be honest with you, you have to open like a business account. It's $150 to $200. But honestly, think about it. If you don't have to get in a car, you don't have to drive anywhere, you don't have to mail anything. Sometimes it's just what I call the speed of convenience, and it's just easier to pay for it. So some of you guys get it for free and some of you can't get it at all. So you're going to wind up in one of those 3 categories: free, paid business account, or you can't get it at all, or you're going to get it for free. So there's actually 4 options on it. Honestly, everything's all over the board. And sometimes you just can't get it without somebody going to the courthouse to pull it. So you have to learn to be creative. So the hard part about pulling these types of lists from your courthouse, which is basically what we call a government list, is they're all different in their requirements. And since you can't physically be there, you're going to have to be hypersensitive to your phone calls when you talk to them and listen very carefully what he or she is saying to you and just try to work on it. So we always teach you, if you're going to pull probates locally, how to kind of schmooze with court employees. Remember, they're just regular people like you and me, just trying to do a job and trying to get by. And you lose that ability when you do it virtually. So that's the downside. The good side is you can go anywhere you want. So let's say worst case scenario, you can't get probates in the county you want to do virtually. Guess what? Just jump to another county if you're dead set on doing probates. And that's what I want you to understand is you absolutely have options in this. And if you understand that, you can make anything work. But you're going to have to get creative when you talk to these people because you can't see them in person, which usually goes a whole lot better because you can use your visual clues. You can look at pictures of their family, their dog portrait, and that's it. So you're going to have to get it electronically. I don't know any other way to do it virtually. Be kind of ill-advised to get on a plane or drive to pull these lists. Now, how often you're pulling the list? Once you get electronic access, you can pull it as often as you want, sometimes 2 times a week, but minimum once a week. You have to do it. And then you're going to have to go through the order of finding out if they own real estate in the property appraiser site, the deceased. And then from there, you have to find the PR on the probate docket. And then from there, you have to skip trace it. So you can go over to dmzack.com. You can skip trace the whole thing and it works just fine. So how do we deal with sellers virtually? And this is probably the most challenging part. This is the only thing that I've had issues with when I'm dealing with probates. And I want you to understand, people are people. You get a lot further with people when you're in front of them as opposed to on the phone for obvious reasons, because almost 60 to 70% of communication is nonverbal. It's your eyes, it's your smile, are my hands open? Are they wide? Just how I'm talking to you right now. You don't get that on the phone. You just got to close your eyes and go, okay, that's what Rick's saying. So when we do that, the number one thing you have to understand with probates is you have to have extreme patience. And if you're not an empathetic person, you usually do very bad in probates. So if you don't have the time and the patience to deal with people's sorrow, their problems, and their pain, and you try to make it transactional, you're going to get killed. I don't care if you do it virtually, locally, you're going to have massive problems when you do it this way. So the number one skill set I teach with probates, and you can check this all out, freewholesaling.com. Number one, you have to be very patient. Number two, stop trying to take the deals down in like 5 minutes over the phone, because that's what every other investor does. The average probate takes 5 to 6 touches before I even talk about price with them. Why? Because I have to take that entire time, hear their story, and build my rapport with, because I'm looking for the emotional connection. And probates, guys, if you've ever dealt with death, especially in your own family, it sucks. And a lot of people are going through pain and grieving process. And the last thing they need is someone like you or me to be a thorn in their butt. So what everybody wants and everybody needs in a probate, doesn't matter if you do this virtually or locally, is this. You have to be a good listener. If you are a good listener, you can get amazing connection with people. If you don't listen and people don't feel like they're heard, they feel like they're disrespected, and they will never do business with you. They will not be involved in a relationship with you, and they don't want to spend time with you in the future. So one of my biggest secrets I can share with you is you have to be an amazing listener. And if you're not going to be an amazing listener, this is going to be painful. So I love probates. I find most investors try to run people over in probates, and they're looking for that fast dopamine hit. And if you're in that society, just dude, tune me out now, because it ain't going to work. People in probates are looking for trust. They're looking that you honor them, and they want to feel like they make the decisions. Even though you can give them the information, you have to understand how probates work. So one of the biggest challenges you have to deal with when dealing with probates virtually is, most of you know your local state laws for probates. If you don't know them and you're doing probates in your own backyard, you better get to know them. Because if you don't understand what type of form it takes to file with the attorney to liquidate the property, you don't really need to know that form, but you need to know of the process and what the name of that form is. And if you don't know it, don't panic. It's okay. Number one, you can go to your state's probate court site, and they will actually walk you through their procedures. And they're pretty much aligned state to state. Each county is a little bit different, and that's the frustrating part. But knowing that, you can do that. Number two, I like to work with my title company. Why? Because title companies deal with a lot of probates, and they know what the norm is in your given state. So if you're doing it locally or you're doing it virtually, your title company has a plethora of information. And the really cool part is the title company doesn't cost you any information. I mean, any money. But the reality is, a lot of people are like, oh, I got to go deal with a probate attorney. I go, unless you do business with this attorney, it's going to cost you a lot of money. And I don't really recommend it. You don't need the attorney, because you're not selling the probate property. You're just buying it. So usually with the guidance of a title company, you can do exactly what you want to accomplish. And it's easy to do that. So how do you do that? Simply understanding your state's probate process. If you don't understand it, look it up online. Talk to your title company, maybe talk to some other investors that have done it, and you want to see what the actual protocol is in the average amount of time. And once you understand that, you can be an asset to your sellers as opposed to being a liability. And that's really, really important with it. So let's deal with kind of the two biggest questions I get in relations to virtual probates. And these aren't the easiest questions to answer in the world. So let's figure out how to do it. So number one, Rick, how do you deal with getting people's signatures? The reality is when you deal with most probates, they're usually an older crowd. I don't need you to walk through the basics of this, but older people tend to die more than younger people. I know that's a shocking stat. So knowing that is we have to get, in an ideal world, we just go get electronic signatures. So you can use DocuSign, eSign. There's so many different software services. Just use the one you're most comfortable with. And they do cost a few bucks, probably $10 to $20 a month is the average. But guys, I'm here to tell you, almost half my virtual probate deals are just a simple overnight package. And then all I do is put the contract in. I put little yellow sticky notes for where they're supposed to sign. And I stick it in you can use FedEx, you can use UPS, you can use United States Postal Service. I prefer the US Postal Service. Why? Because it's the cheapest. And number two, if you go in the morning, put the contract in there. And then here's the key is you put in a return prepaid envelope, express mail, 1 to 3 days, and it'll have a tracking digit on it. And what this allows you to do is the older people that don't deal with the internet, you can put the contract in there. They'll get it in 24 hours. And then once they sign it, all they have to do is call the FedEx number. And I'm sorry, the United States Postal Service, because most people get mail to their house and the mailman will pick it up. There's no extra like pickup fee. It's done every 24 hours. That's why I like using the US Postal Service, even though I don't trust the government with much of anything. But the reality, it is convenient because they can just hand it to their mailman and it's done. And then once the mailman brings it back to the postal center, they'll scan it and you'll get an electronic notification that your package is on the way back to you. And that's when you know you have a deal. So many people are so dependent on DocuSign, eSign, and you freak out a lot of older people with it. They don't know how to do it. They don't know how to sign in. So if you have someone that somewhat has a IQ on the internet, email, electronics, what I would do is walk them through it. Open your email, click this button. It'll tell you to okay, authorize. You got to put your signature in there. I would walk them through it. That way you know it's done. And if it winds up becoming too much of a burden or freaks them out, just say, tell you what, would you be okay if I just overnighted you to the contract? You're just going to open it, the mailman will bring it to you, you sign it, and you put it back in, and the next day you can give it back to your mailman and give it back. Would that make you more comfortable? Boom, done. I'm telling you guys, I love DocuSign, but I probably 50% of my people will never go for it because they don't even work in email. They hate everything social media. And so they don't trust anything electronic. So the easiest way to overcome it is simply do an overnight package. The cost of it, it's about $23 to $26, depending on where you are in the country. Well worth it. I'm here to tell you, you've got to understand that. So the next thing is, people are always like, well, how do I deal with boots on the ground? Boots on the ground just refers to people helping you out when you do virtual wholesaling. Boots on the ground is always going to be a challenge for virtual wholesaling. It's a challenge for me in my business, and I'm sure it's a challenge for anybody who's watching us doing virtual wholesaling. Usual boots on the ground are people that you've worked with in the past, either ex-realtors, ex-contractors. Sometimes they're just friends, and sometimes they're family members. And maybe it's in a state you used to live in, or you grew up there, and you're using them to help you vet and look at deals. That's fine. We can get it done. But keep in mind, these people's jobs just to help you with, when I say boots on the ground, like it's a boot on the ground and they're your eyeballs when you're not there. So when you have boots on the ground, they help you look at things. They help you analyze stuff. And 9 times out of 10, there's 2 main features why you have boots on the ground. Number one, they're there to help you get signatures. Now, if you don't use my United States Postal Service, you have 2 options here. You can use your boots on the ground. At that point, you better have some trust level in the person, because having them get signatures can be a risky deal, because they can start talking about things they don't know anything about, and it could actually risk your signature on the deal. Number 2, you can send a mobile notary. You can use notary123.com. I believe it's $50 to $75, and they can go out there and notarize a seller's signature at their house. Good and bad with that, they're just there to verify that the seller is who they say they are. And they're never going to explain the contract. You have to explain the contract and let them know you're just sending someone out there to authorize the signature. So you have several options. You can do the DocuSign, the eSign. You can do the USPS overnight. That's about $24, $25, depending on where you are. The other one is you can use a boots on the ground, someone you're working locally to get the signature. And the last one is going to use a mobile notary which is going to cost you between $50 and $75. As I said, it's not very personable, but it is super convenient to the seller. And the reality is, in most states, you don't need the signature notarized, but every now and then, some people like to do it with a person right there to have it signed. It's not a bad way because once you get it signed, they scan the documents and then they'll mail the originals back to you, and you know you have a deal. So remember, the last thing you want to do is risk when you have a verbal agreement. You have to strike within 48 to 72 hours to get that thing inked, or you're going to lose your great virtual probate deal. Ask me how I know this because it's happened to me a lot. So you have to move with speed with it. So once you understand that, the next biggest thing, ready? How do I deal with the walkthroughs? I'm not going to even lie to you on this one. It is challenging. So when we say the walkthroughs, I mostly mean when you're walking cash buyers through. Your walkthrough should be comprised of the seller sending you pictures or using your boots on the ground to gather pictures all around that property, and you can kind of assess if you have a deal or not. The next part of it is the boots on the not the boots on the ground, the walking the cash buyers through. Now, if the property is vacant, it's not the end of the world. So if you put a lockbox on it, which is ideal, that is going to be the best way to deal with it. But the reality is, one of the biggest problems we have come up on virtual probates is how do we get access to the house? Because a lot of times the sellers don't even have the key. And I'm going to teach you a little trick here. If they constantly tell you, I don't have a key, I don't have a key, I'll get a key cut and I'll mail it to you. They're never going to mail you the key. I've had a few keys mailed into me over my years, but for the most part, you have to take charge of this. And here's what I say when someone doesn't have a key to the property, because maybe they left it under the mat. Maybe the neighbor has it. A lot of time the neighbor's on vacation. The last thing you want to do is depend on a neighbor that can't even find the key. So I got to tell you what, Ruth, here's what I'll do. Since you don't have a key, I understand it. What if I call a licensed and insured locksmith to come out to the property? He'll rekey the property. And then what I'll do is I'll keep a key and put it in a lockbox to make it convenient. That way I don't have to bother you. And then I'll also mail you the original key in case you ever need to get access because it's your property. Does that sound fair? That simple. Don't ever wait for the neighbor, the friend, the cousin, the uncle, the sister, the brother to bring you the key. It's never going to happen because they're not making any money with the house and they don't care. Number two, the seller doesn't know how to get a key locally. So if you offer that service, it will help out greatly. You can work with your boots on the ground to do that, but I'm just telling you, the little key secret works well. Now, not most of the time, if you have a lockbox, you can walk them right through. Now, in the event the probate's occupied, these are the challenging ones virtually. This is where if you have a boots on the ground, it makes a tremendous difference. I know you're going to say, Rick, how the hell do I hire boots on the ground? It's not very complicated. They're mostly Craigslist ads, Facebook ads, stuff like that. Looking to have someone to take pictures of the property, help me do walkthroughs of the property, and help me assess it, and occasionally help gather signatures. On average, when you have someone do it, once they send you the photos, and only when they do that in a Google Drive, is basically paying between $50 and $75, maybe $100, depending on what market you're at. And honestly, you're going to lose on a few of them, but for the most part, they more than pay for themselves. And as that person demonstrates trust, they take pictures, they deliver them on time, they help find problems, they help solve things. I might graduate them to be a more direct boots on the ground where they're helping getting signatures. They talk to sellers, but don't ever start off with the boots on the ground and their job is to collect signatures from the seller or convince them to sign because they're usually going to freak out on it. It's not their best skill set. So on an inexperienced boot on the ground, here's what I always tell you. Have them go to the property, call you on your phone, and then basically on your phone, put it on speaker, and then you can answer any questions and they can navigate and they can tell you the seller's reaction. They can tell you if they signed the documents and they can tell you what the overall temperament of that seller was when they left the appointment. You see, because you can't just get that over the phone. And honestly, if you can get that for a boots on the ground for $50 to $75, well worth it. So even if you send them on 4 properties and only one works out, it more than makes up for it. So if you spent $200 to $300 on them and then you made $30,000 or $40,000, you understand the business of this. And that's why it would work out really, really well for you. So I want you to understand that. So that's how I walk through them. We've already talked about the boots on the ground. They're a pain in the butt to hire for. This is probably the most challenging part. Now, if you are in a virtual probate market where you have done business for in the past, I'm sorry, that maybe you live there, maybe you went to college there, maybe you grew up there, you have family and friends there, it's kind of a natural progression to hire someone you know and you trust. Now, if it's in a market you know nothing about, you're going to have to do it the good old fashioned way: Craigslist, Facebook ads, just social media posts, and find someone. And to be honest with you, you're going to go through a lot of them. So be prepared when you find someone that's trustworthy, that will do what they say, take care of them, help them out. And then maybe eventually they can step up and help you do some of the virtual appointments without like them actually being there. But they're going to have to earn your trust. You don't give it to them. Last but not least, guys, you ready? You have got to teach them the probate secret. What do I mean by probate secret? I've already told you in the beginning of this live stream that your competitive advantage over everyone else is everybody to this date, I saw one of the biggest influencers recently in this last month say you can't do a probate till it's completed. I very clear that this person, he or she, clearly does not do probates, because I'm here to tell you, on a wholesale transaction, you can buy a probate before the process is complete. End of story. There are a few exceptions. If you're in one of those counties, I'm not going to read them out. There's 3,200 plus counties. So when a seller goes, listen, my lawyer said, Brooke, I can't do anything till this probate's complete, I just kind of like, I tell you, I go, Jen, I tell you what, I respect you for hiring a lawyer. I think it's the right move. But what if I could tell you could actually sell the property before the probate's complete, legally, correctly, and you can get that done relatively quickly? Would that be of interest to you? And they go, heck yeah, Rick, I would love to talk to you. I tell you what, why don't I come by tomorrow at 2 o'clock, or we're doing this virtually, why don't we do this? Let me get all the information on the house, send over the pictures, what you got. I'll call you back. I'm going to go through it and we'll talk about it a little bit more in detail. And then I'd be happy to share you that information and walk you through it. Oh, that'd be great. That's it. So by showing them the secret that I can buy the probate before it's complete, it gives me a competitive advantage because everyone else doesn't think you can do it. So just so you understand, that process basically entails the lawyer that's representing the seller's interest in the probate, not yours. And then basically they can file a document with the judge asking to liquidate the largest asset in the probate, which is always the real estate. And the reason they build this in there, because think about it, a property could be a huge drain financially. The mortgage payment, the insurance, the utilities, you got to cut the lawn, you got to shovel the snow, you got to turn on the power, the AC, the heater. It's ridiculous. And a lot of people are not in a financial position to bear that, especially for a year to 2 years waiting for the probate to complete. So they basically built in this leniency that you can liquidate an asset within the probate because it's causing financial hardship. And it's quite normal in the process. For some reason, every lawyer tells their clients, you can't do this. My theory, I'm not a lawyer, and the lawyers don't like me, and I don't like, if they don't like me, it means I'm doing things right, is they want control. They can control billing, they can control everything. And so they don't want you to enter into an agreement. So if the PR enters into an agreement with like a seller like me and a wholesaler, that's it. I don't need a lawyer to do anything other than file that paperwork. And here's the best part is I never talk to the lawyer. I have the seller give them the news, and then I work with the title company to instruct the seller on what form needs to be filed on behalf of the lawyer. That's it. And guys, I've got probably more data than any other investor out there that proves my theory. You can easily sell a probate prior to the probate process being completed. Now, I want you to understand this. That means that so if they got $100,000 from the sale of the house, that money goes to like the estate of John Doe. And once the probate's wrapped up, then they release that money. So they do hold the money back, but here's the key. The money's not being picked away at with payments, fees, insurance, taxes, all this other crap you got to do with it. And number two, the seller, the PR doesn't have the headache of that property, like worrying, did I pay the mortgage this month? Did the guy cut the grass? Did they paint the house? Is the city coming down with me on code violations? All that gets stopped. And that's where you, the wholesaler, comes in. The bigger the problem you can solve, the more money you're going to make. And guys, you've got to know this little secret on probates, because this has like made me a ton of money. And honestly, it can make you a ton of deal. So